The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as the train pulled into the dusty station of Fort Davis, Texas, in 1878. The whistle pierced the evening air, announcing its arrival with a melancholy wail that seemed to echo the desperation of the three women huddled together on the wooden platform. Their faces were drawn with exhaustion, their once fine clothes now travel-worn and dusty from the long journey west. Tabitha O'Malley clutched her younger sister's hand, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger in her stomach. Next to her, Temperance O'Connor dabbed at her reddened eyes with a handkerchief that had seen better days, while Theodora Owen stood slightly apart, her proud posture belying the uncertainty in her eyes as she scanned the unfamiliar surroundings. "What now?" whispered Temperance, her voice barely audible above the hissing steam of the cooling engine. "We've come all this way, and for what? There's nothing here for us." Tabitha squared her shoulders, determined not to show her own fear. "We'll find something. We always do." "We have exactly $3.27 between us," Theodora reminded them, her practical nature asserting itself despite their dire circumstances. "That won't last more than a day or two, even if we're careful." The three women fell silent, each lost in her own thoughts as the last passengers disembarked and the station began to empty. They had fled San Antonio after the fire that had claimed both their boarding house and their positions at the millinery shop. With nowhere else to go and rumors of opportunities in the Western Territories, they had pooled their meager savings for train tickets, hoping for a fresh start. Now, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the chill of the desert night began to seep into their bones, that hope seemed foolish. "Ladies," a deep voice broke into their thoughts, causing all three to turn. A tall figure approached, his spurs jingling with each step. As he came closer, the fading light revealed a man in his early 30s, his face weathered by sun and wind, his eyes a piercing blue beneath the wide brim of his Stetson. Despite the dust coating his clothes, there was something undeniably commanding about his presence. "Pardon the intrusion," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed to be without accommodation for the night." Theodora stepped forward, instinctively placing herself between the stranger and her companions. "We'll manage, sir, thank you." The man's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "I'm sure you would, madam, but Fort Davis isn't the safest place for unaccompanied ladies after dark." He glanced at their limited luggage. "I'm Quentin Abernathy. I own the Circle Ranch about 15 miles north of here." "And what concern is that of ours, Mr. Abernathy?" Tabitha asked, her tone polite but guarded. "My ranch needs all of you," he said simply. The three women exchanged wary glances. "I beg your pardon." Theodora's voice was sharp. Quentin Abernathy held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I apologize if that sounded forward. What I mean is, I have positions available that might suit your circumstances." He looked each woman in the eye. "My housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing mother. The place is falling apart without her. And I need someone with a head for figures to manage the books, as well as someone who can help with the correspondence and teaching my foreman's children." "You're offering us jobs?" Temperance asked, hope creeping into her voice for the first time since they'd arrived. "Room, board, and fair wages," he confirmed with a nod. "At least until you decide what you want to do next." Theodora narrowed her eyes. "Why would you offer positions to three women you've never met?" Quentin's expression turned grim. "Because I recognize desperate circumstances when I see them, madam. I was in a similar situation myself once." His gaze swept over them once more. "And because good help is hard to find out here. You look like educated women who have fallen on hard times, not drifters or troublemakers." "We need to discuss this privately," Tabitha said after a moment of charged silence. "Of course." He stepped back. "I'll wait by the wagon. Take your time, but not too much. We've got a fair ride ahead of us if you decide to accept." As he walked away, the three women formed a tight circle. "We can't possibly go with him," Theodora hissed. "We know nothing about this man. We know he's offering us shelter, food, and work," Temperance countered. "What alternatives do we have?" Tabitha chewed her lower lip. "He seems genuine enough." "So did that banker in Austin before he tried to compromise Temperance," Theodora reminded her. "This feels different," Tabitha insisted. "And Temperance is right. What choice do we have? We can't sleep at the station, and we certainly can't afford rooms at a hotel." After several more minutes of heated debate, practicality won out over caution. With few options and night falling rapidly, they approached the wagon where Quentin Abernathy waited patiently. "We accept your offer, Mr. Abernathy," Tabitha announced, "at least provisionally." A genuine smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges. "Excellent. Let me help you with your bags." As they climbed onto the wagon and settled themselves among the supplies Quentin had purchased in town, Tabitha couldn't help wondering if they had made a terrible mistake or found an unexpected salvation. Either way, there was no turning back now. The journey to Circle Ranch passed mostly in silence. Exhaustion and the lateness of the hour discouraged conversation, though Quentin occasionally pointed out landmarks visible in the moonlight or warned them of an upcoming rough patch in the road. The women huddled beneath the blankets he had provided, grateful for their warmth against the desert night's chill. It was well past midnight when they finally approached the ranch. In the moonlight, they could make out the silhouette of a substantial main house, several outbuildings and corrals. Lanterns burned in a few windows, casting warm yellow light into the darkness. "Home," Quentin said simply as he guided the horses toward the house. The front door opened as they drew near, and a lantern-bearing figure emerged onto the porch. "About time you got back, boss," called a gruff voice. "Was beginning to think you'd decided to stay in town for the night." "Had some unexpected business, Miguel," Quentin replied as he brought the wagon to a halt, "and I've brought some help for the place." Miguel raised his lantern higher, illuminating the three women. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "I'll be damned," he muttered, then quickly added, "Pardon my language, ladies." Quentin jumped down from the wagon and helped each woman descend in turn. "This is Miguel Fuentes, my foreman. Miguel, these ladies will be joining us at Circle A." Proper introductions can wait until morning when everyone's had some rest. Miguel nodded, studying them with open curiosity. "I'll wake Rosa to get rooms ready." "No need to disturb her," Quentin said. "I'll show our guests to the spare rooms myself." "Could you see to the horses and unload the supplies?" "Of course." The foreman took the reins, still eyeing the newcomers with interest. Quentin led them into the house, which proved to be unexpectedly well appointed inside. The furniture was solid and of good quality if not particularly fashionable, and everything was clean if somewhat dusty in the corners. "It's not what you might be accustomed to," he said, noting their surprised expressions, "but it's comfortable enough." "It's lovely," Temperance said sincerely. He showed them to three adjacent rooms on the second floor, each simple but adequate, with a bed, washstand, and bureau. "The washroom is at the end of the hall," he explained. "I'm afraid you'll have to share it. We usually bring water up in the evenings for washing, but given the late hour." He trailed off apologetically. "We'll manage until morning," Tabitha assured him. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Abernathy. Quentin, please, we're not much for formality out here." He hesitated, then added, "I realize you've taken a considerable risk coming here with me. I want to assure you that you're safe at Circle A. My door is the last one on the left if you need anything during the night, but otherwise, I'll see you at breakfast. Sleep well, ladies." With that, he left them to settle in, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Once alone, the three women gathered in Theodora's room. "Well," Theodora said softly, "we've committed ourselves now." "The house is nicer than I expected," Temperance observed. Tabitha nodded. "And he seems honorable enough." "For now," Theodora cautioned. "Let's not forget we're entirely at his mercy out here. We should be on our guard until we know him better." They agreed to remain vigilant, but exhaustion soon drove them to their separate beds. Despite her wariness, Tabitha fell asleep almost immediately, lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft hoot of an owl, and the gentle creaking of the house as it settled. Morning came with a soft knock at her door and a gentle voice announcing, "Breakfast in 30 minutes, señorita." Tabitha dressed quickly in one of her two remaining decent dresses and found Theodora and Temperance already in the hallway, looking as refreshed as one could be after their ordeal. They followed the smell of coffee and food downstairs to a spacious kitchen where a middle-aged Mexican woman was frying bacon at the stove. She turned as they entered, offering a warm smile. "Buenos dias. I am Rosa Fuentes, Miguel's wife. Come sit. You must be hungry after your journey." The table was already set with plates, cutlery, and steaming mugs of coffee. Through the window, they could see men moving about the yard, beginning the day's work. "Mr. Abernathy?" Tabitha inquired, accepting a plate loaded with eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "He's been up since dawn," Rosa replied. "He'll join you shortly. He had to deal with a matter in the south pasture." As they ate, Rosa chatted amiably, filling them in on the ranch and its operations. Circle sprawled over several thousand acres, running cattle and horses. Besides Quentin and the Fuentes family, there were 8 cowboys who lived in the bunkhouse, a Chinese cook who prepared meals for the men, and Rosa's niece who helped with laundry and other chores. "The ranch does well," Rosa said, "but it needs a woman's touch in the main house. Mr. Quentin, he works too hard and notices too little about his own comfort." Before they could ask more questions, the back door opened and Quentin entered, looking even more imposing in the daylight. He had shed his trail clothes for clean denims and a fresh shirt, his hair still damp from washing. "Good morning, ladies," he greeted them. "I hope you slept well." After assurances that they had, he took a seat at the table and accepted a plate from Rosa. "I thought we might discuss the particulars of your employment after breakfast, if that suits you," the women agreed, and once the meal was finished, he led them to a study at the front of the house. Unlike the rest of the rooms they had seen, this one showed signs of regular use. Papers were stacked on the desk. Books lined the shelves, and a ledger lay open beside an inkwell. "Now then," he said, settling behind the desk while they took chairs opposite, "I believe we should clarify what I'm offering and what I expect in return." For the next hour, they discussed the positions available. Theodora, with her experience as a schoolteacher before circumstances forced her into millinery work, would take charge of educating the Fuentes children and any others from the neighboring ranches who wished to attend. Temperance, who had a talent for organization and homemaking, would serve as housekeeper. And Tabitha, with her quick mind for figures and elegant handwriting, would assist with the ranch accounts and correspondence. "The wages aren't what you might earn in a city," Quentin admitted, "but you'll have no expenses while you're here. Room, board, laundry all provided, and you'll be treated with respect." He looked each woman in the eye. "I give you my word on that. What about days off, social opportunities?" Theodora asked practically. "Sundays are yours unless there's an emergency. As for social life," he smiled slightly, We're rather isolated here, but there are gatherings now and then, barn dances, church socials in town, that sort of thing. You'll be welcome to attend, of course." They negotiated a few more details before reaching an agreement that satisfied all parties. As they rose to leave, Quentin added, "One more thing. I don't know what circumstances brought you to Fort Davis, and I won't pry. Your pasts are your own. But here at Circle A, you have a fresh start if you want it." Something in his tone suggested he understood more than he let on, but he asked no questions, and they volunteered no information. The following days passed in a blur of activity as the women settled into their new roles. The work was demanding but satisfying, and they quickly proved their worth. Theodora converted a small outbuilding into a schoolroom and soon had 6 children, ranging in age from 5 to 12, attending regular lessons. Temperance tackled the neglected main house with energy and determination, bringing order to chaos room by room. And Tabitha discovered that the ranch books were in desperate need of attention. Quentin was an excellent cattleman but a haphazard record keeper. As April turned to May, they began to feel at home at Circle A. The initial wariness they had felt toward Quentin faded as they came to know him better. He was fair-minded and considerate, if somewhat reserved. He treated his workers well and never raised his voice in anger, though he could be firm when necessary. And if he sometimes watched Tabitha with an intensity that made her cheeks warm, she pretended not to notice. One evening, as Tabitha worked late in the study organizing receipts, Quentin returned from a day of riding the fence lines. He paused in the doorway, observing her bent head and the way the lamplight caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair. "You're still working?" he asked softly, startling her. "Oh, Mr. Abernathy, Quentin, yes, I'm almost finished with the April accounts." She gestured to the neat stacks of papers. "Your system was a bit unconventional," he laughed, a rich sound she had come to enjoy. "That's a kind way of saying it was a mess." "Well," she smiled, "perhaps a bit disorganized." He crossed to the desk, looking over her shoulder at the ledger. "I'm fortunate you came along when you did. Another month and I might have lost track completely." She was acutely aware of his proximity, of the faint scent of leather and horses that clung to him, of the warmth radiating from his body. "It's no trouble," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I enjoy the work, actually. And you're good at it." He straightened and moved to pour himself a drink from the sideboard. "Can I offer you something? Sherry, perhaps?" She hesitated, then nodded. "A small one, thank you." He handed her the glass, their fingers brushing momentarily. "May I ask you something, Tabitha, of course? What brought you and your friends to Fort Davis? Women like you don't usually find themselves stranded at remote train stations." She sipped her sherry, considering how much to reveal. "Necessity," she finally said. "We lost everything in a fire in San Antonio, our lodgings, our positions, nearly all our possessions." His expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry. We heard there were opportunities in the Western Territories for those willing to start fresh. We had just enough money for train tickets." She looked down at her glass. "When the train stopped at Fort Davis, we realized we hadn't planned very well beyond that point. And then I appeared. Like a character in a dime novel," she agreed with a small smile. "The mysterious rancher offering salvation." "Hardly mysterious," he demurred. "Just a man who recognizes an opportunity when he sees one. And you 3 have been a godsend to Circle A." They talked a while longer, the conversation flowing easily between them. As the mantel clock struck 10, Tabitha reluctantly closed the ledger. "I should retire," she said. "It's getting late, of course." He took her empty glass. "Thank you for the company, Tabitha. It's been pleasant." "It has," she agreed, surprised to realize how much she had enjoyed their conversation. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she reflected that life at Circle A was turning out far differently than she had imagined when they first arrived. The ranch was becoming home, and its owner was becoming something more than just an employer. May brought the spring cattle drive, a time of intense activity as the ranch prepared to move herds to market. Quentin was often away, riding with his men, leaving the women to manage the household in his absence. They proved more than equal to the task, establishing routines and solving problems with growing confidence. When not working, they explored their surroundings, discovering hidden corners of beauty in the harsh landscape, a spring-fed pool perfect for cooling off on hot afternoons, a grove of cottonwoods where wildflowers bloomed in profusion, a hilltop that offered spectacular views at sunset. It was at this last spot that Quentin found Tabitha one evening in late May, watching the sun sink below the horizon in a blaze of crimson and gold. "I thought I might find you here," he said, dismounting from his horse to join her on the rocky outcrop. "It's becoming my favorite place," she admitted. "The vastness of it all. It puts things in perspective." He nodded, understanding. "That's why I chose this land. Every time I stand here, I'm reminded of how small we are and yet how much we can accomplish with determination." They stood in companionable silence as the last rays of sunlight faded and the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. "The cattle drive went well?" she asked eventually. "Better than expected. The prices were good this year." Another comfortable silence fell between them before he spoke again, his voice different somehow. "Tabitha, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She turned to face him, heart suddenly racing. "Yes. There's a social at the Hendersons' ranch this Saturday. Dancing, food, the usual festivities." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Would you do me the honor of accompanying me?" The invitation was clearly more than a casual outing between employer and employee. It was a statement in the small community where such things were noticed and remarked upon. "I would like that very much," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. His smile was swift and genuine. "Excellent. We'll make a day of it. Leave after lunch if that suits you." She nodded, unable to suppress her own smile. "It does." When she shared the news with Theodora and Temperance later that evening, their reactions were predictably different. "Well, it's about time," Temperance said with a satisfied nod. "He's been watching you for weeks." "Are you certain this is wise?" Theodora cautioned. "We're still dependent on him for our livelihoods." "I'm not certain of anything," Tabitha confessed, "except that I want to go to this social with him." Theodora's expression softened. "Then I'm happy for you, my dear. Just be careful with your heart." Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and a gentle breeze that took the edge off the late spring heat. Tabitha wore her best dress, a deep blue that complemented her eyes, freshly pressed by Temperance for the occasion. Quentin was waiting for her on the porch, looking uncommonly formal in a clean suit and polished boots. His eyes widened appreciatively as she descended the stairs. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." She accepted his arm as he led her to the waiting buggy, a much more comfortable conveyance than the wagon they had arrived in months earlier. The Henderson Ranch was about an hour's drive from Circle A. As they traveled, Quentin pointed out features of the landscape and told her stories of his early days in the territory. He had come west as a young man of 20, working as a cowhand on various ranches before saving enough to buy his own small spread. Through hard work and smart decisions, he had expanded Circle into one of the most successful operations in the county. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "There were times I nearly lost everything: drought years, cattle thieves, market crashes, but something kept me going." "What was that?" she asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question. The belief that I was building something worthwhile, something that would last. The social was already in full swing when they arrived. A cleared area served as a dance floor, with lanterns strung overhead to illuminate the gathering darkness. Tables laden with food and drink lined one side, while a small band of musicians played lively tunes. Quentin helped her down from the buggy and offered his arm again. Ready to face the curious stares. You'll be quite the topic of conversation, I'm afraid. Because I'm new to the area, his lips quirked in that half-smile she had come to find so charming. Because you're with me, I've never brought a lady to one of these gatherings before. The significance of that statement wasn't lost on her. As they approached the gathering, heads indeed turned, conversations paused, and curious glances were cast their way. James Henderson, their host, broke away from a group to greet them. "Quentin, glad you could make it." He turned to Tabitha with obvious interest. "And this must be one of the ladies I've heard so much about." "James, may I present Miss Tabitha O'Malley," Quentin said formally. "Tabitha, James Henderson, our neighbor to the east." "A pleasure, Miss O'Malley," Henderson said, bowing slightly. "We've been curious about Quentin's mysterious new house guests. 3 ladies appearing out of nowhere caused quite a stir in these parts." "I'm sure it did," she replied with a polite smile. "But there's nothing mysterious about us, I'm afraid. Just 3 women looking for a new start. And finding it at Circle A, it seems." Henderson's gaze moved between them speculatively. "Well, don't let me keep you. There's food, drink, and plenty of folks eager to meet you." The next few hours passed in a whirl of introductions, conversation, and dancing. Quentin proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding her confidently through waltzes and reels. Between dances, he stayed close, his hand often resting lightly at the small of her back as he introduced her to neighbors and friends. As the evening progressed, Tabitha found herself genuinely enjoying the company and the sense of belonging to this community. The people were straightforward and welcoming, curious about her but not intrusive. During a pause in the dancing, they stepped away from the crowd to catch their breath. Quentin brought her a cup of punch, and they walked toward the edge of the gathering where conversation was easier. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked. "Very much." She sipped her punch, watching the dancers. "Everyone has been so kind. They're good people, salt of the earth, as they say." He studied her profile in the lantern light. "You fit in well here." She turned to meet his gaze. "Do I?" "Yes." There was something in his voice, a certainty that made her breath catch. "Tabitha, he was interrupted by a commotion near the dance floor." A man's angry voice rose above the music, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Quentin frowned, handing her his punch cup. "Excuse me, I should see what's happening." She watched as he strode toward the disturbance, where 2 men were now squared off against each other, one swaying slightly, obviously intoxicated. "That's enough, Peterson," Quentin said firmly, stepping between them. "This isn't the place for your grievances." "Stay out of this, Abernathy," the drunk man slurred. "This is between me and Davis." "Not tonight it isn't," Quentin insisted. "Go home and sleep it off." For a moment, it seemed the man might argue further, but something in Quentin's stance made him reconsider. With a muttered curse, he turned and stumbled away, supported by a friend. The incident quickly forgotten, the dancing resumed. When Quentin returned to her side, Tabitha handed him his punch. "That was well handled," she observed. He shrugged. "Peterson's harmless enough when sober. Just can't hold his liquor." He set the cups aside. "Now, where were we before the interruption?" The band struck up a slow waltz and he held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" She placed her hand in his. "You may." As he guided her onto the dance floor and drew her into his arms, she was acutely aware of the solid strength of him, the sure way he moved. the intensity in his eyes as he looked down at her. "What I was trying to say earlier," he continued in a low voice meant only for her, "is that you've brought something to Circula that was missing before, not just order to the books or help with the house, but—" He searched for the right words. "Light. Life." Her heart raced at the sincerity in his voice. "It's been missing from my life as well," she admitted. "Until now." The music swelled around them as they moved together, oblivious to the other dancers, to the curious glances, to everything but each other. When the dance ended, he didn't release her hand. "Would you like to step outside for a moment? It's getting rather warm in here." She nodded, allowing him to lead her through the crowd and out onto the wide porch that wrapped around the Henderson house. The night air was cool and refreshing after the heat of the dance floor, the stars brilliant overhead. They walked to the far end of the porch where they could speak privately. For a moment, neither said anything, content to stand in the moonlight, shoulders almost touching as they gazed out at the silvered landscape. "Tabitha," Quentin finally broke the silence, turning to face her. "I know you came to Circula out of necessity, not choice. And I know your position there puts certain constraints on what I can say to you." She looked up at him, heart in her throat. "What is it you want to say?" He took a deep breath. "That in these few months you've become essential to me, not as an employee but as a woman. That I find myself thinking of you at odd moments, wondering what you'd think of a sunset or how you'd laugh at something Miguel said." He ran a hand through his hair, uncharacteristically nervous. "That I'd like to court you properly if you'd allow it." Joy surged through her, unexpected and overwhelming. "I would allow it," she said softly. "Very much." Relief and happiness transformed his face. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and brushed his lips against hers, a question, not a demand. She answered by rising on tiptoe to press her mouth more firmly to his, her hands coming to rest lightly on his chest. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, full of promise rather than passion. When they parted, he kept her close, his forehead touching hers. "I should warn you," he murmured, "that I'm not a man who does things by halves. If we begin this, I'll be thinking of a future together, not just a passing dalliance." "I would expect nothing less," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. They rejoined the gathering a short while later. Nothing in their appearance to suggest the momentous conversation that had just occurred, though Tabitha suspected her flushed cheeks and bright eyes might tell their own tale. The drive back to Circula was filled with a new awareness between them. They talked easily, but beneath the conversation lay the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted. When they arrived at the ranch, Quentin helped her down from the buggy, holding her perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," she said. "The pleasure was mine." He hesitated, then added, "May I call on you tomorrow? Perhaps a ride around the property if the weather holds. I'd like that." He kissed her hand before bidding her good night, the gesture old-fashioned and courtly, at odds with the rugged surroundings but perfectly in keeping with the man himself. As Tabitha prepared for bed, her thoughts were in a pleasant whirl. When a soft knock came at her door, she opened it to find Temperance and Theodora waiting expectantly. "Well," Temperance demanded as soon as the door closed behind them, "tell us everything." Tabitha laughed, her happiness too great to contain. "He's going to court me," she said simply. Temperance squealed with delight, while Theodora's expression was one of cautious happiness. "I'm glad for you," she said, embracing Tabitha. "He seems to be a good man." "He is," Tabitha affirmed, "one of the best I've ever known." As spring gave way to the heat of summer, Quentin courted Tabitha with the same thoughtful determination he brought to everything. There were rides across the ranch lands, picnics by the spring, quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset. They discovered shared interests, a love of books, a dry sense of humor, a deep appreciation for the wild beauty of the land. Their growing relationship changed the dynamics at Circle in subtle ways. Tabitha was still officially the bookkeeper, but increasingly she found herself consulted on other ranch matters as well. Quentin valued her opinion and wasn't afraid to show it, even in front of his men. For their part, the ranch hands accepted the situation with good-natured teasing of their boss and respectful treatment of Tabitha. They had seen the positive changes in both Quentin and the ranch since the women's arrival and approved of the match. Theodora and Temperance found their own places in the Circle, a community as well. Theodora's school was flourishing, with children now coming from 3 neighboring ranches for instruction. Her natural dignity and intelligence earned her the respect of everyone she encountered. Temperance, meanwhile, had developed an unexpected friendship with Miguel's eldest son, Diego, a serious young man of 22 who helped with the ranch horses. Their shared love of animals drew them together initially, but soon they were often seen deep in conversation. Heads bent close as they discussed horses, dogs, and increasingly, more personal matters. One sweltering afternoon in late July, as Tabitha worked in the study with the windows open to catch any hint of breeze, she heard the sound of approaching riders. Looking out, she saw Quentin and several of his men returning earlier than expected from checking the northern pastures. Something in their haste in the set of Quentin's shoulders as he dismounted told her this wasn't a routine return. She met him at the door, concern evident in her face. "What's happened?" he grimaced, removing his hat and wiping sweat from his brow. "Trouble. We found a section of fence cut and about 30 head missing." He crossed to the sideboard, pouring water from the pitcher. "It's the 3rd incident this month." Cattle rustling was a serious matter in a land where a man's livelihood depended on his herds. Previous incidents had been minor, a few animals taken, more nuisance than threat, but this was escalation. "You know who's responsible?" she asked. "I have suspicions." He drained the glass and set it down with controlled force. "There's a new outfit setting up north of here, run by a man named Harlan Blackstone. He's been buying up small spreads, but rumor has it he's not too particular about where all his cattle come from." Tabitha frowned. "Surely the law is stretched thin out here," he interrupted. "And proof is hard to come by unless we catch them in the act." He left the sentence unfinished. "What will you do?" "For now, double the night patrols. Miguel's organizing the men." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I hate to ask this, but would you mind handling things here for a few days? I need to ride to Fort Davis, talk to the sheriff, maybe visit some of the neighboring ranches to see if they've had similar problems." "Of course," she said without hesitation. "Take whatever time you need. We'll manage here." Relief softened his expression. He crossed to her and took her hands in his. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You picked up 3 stranded women at a train station," she reminded him with a small smile. "A most fortuitous decision." He laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "The best decision I ever made." He kissed her briefly, mindful that they were in a public area of the house. "I'll leave at first light tomorrow. Shouldn't be gone more than 3 or 4 days." Quentin departed as planned, leaving Miguel in charge of the ranch operations. The days passed uneventfully, though Tabitha found herself missing Quentin's presence more than she had anticipated. She had grown accustomed to their evening conversations, to seeing him across the dining table, to the casual touches and shared glances that punctuated their days. On the 3rd night of his absence, she was awakened by urgent knocking at her bedroom door. Throwing on a robe, she opened it to find Diego, his young face grave in the light of the lamp he carried. "Miss Tabitha, you need to come quickly. There's trouble." She followed him downstairs, where Miguel waited, armed with a rifle. Through the open door, she could see flames lighting up the night sky in the direction of the north pasture. "Fire," Miguel said tersely. "Deliberate by the looks of it. I've sent some men to try to control it, but I need to join them." He handed her a pistol. "Keep this with you. The women and children are gathering in the main room. Stay inside, doors locked." "Should I send someone for help?" she asked, taking the weapon with steady hands. "I've already dispatched a rider to the nearest ranch," he assured her. "Just keep everyone calm and safe here." As Miguel and Diego rode off toward the fire, Tabitha organized the remaining household. Rosa and her younger children, Theodora, Temperance, and the Chinese cook, Mr. Lin, gathered in the main room as instructed. Tabitha checked that all doors and windows were secured, the pistol never far from her reach. "You think it's the rustlers?" Temperance asked, her face pale in the lamplight. "Most likely," Tabitha replied grimly. "Setting a fire would be a good distraction while they steal more cattle." "Or retaliation for increased patrols," Theodora suggested. "Either way, it's a deliberate escalation." The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Occasionally they could hear distant shouts or the sound of galloping horses, but no one approached the house. Toward dawn, the glow in the sky diminished, suggesting the fire was under control. It was mid-morning before Miguel returned, exhausted and smoke-stained but uninjured. The news was mixed. They had contained the fire before it could spread beyond a small section of grazing land, but during the chaos, more cattle had indeed been taken. "And there's more," Miguel added, accepting a cup of coffee from Rosa. One of the men spotted riders heading east with the stolen animals. He recognized Blackstone's foreman among them. "Finally, some proof," Tabitha said. "When Quentin returns, he may already be on his way back," Miguel interrupted. "I sent a rider to Fort Davis yesterday with news of the first fire." "First fire?" Theodora asked sharply. Miguel nodded. "There was a smaller one the night before last on the western boundary. We managed it ourselves, didn't want to worry you ladies." Tabitha frowned, concerned by this pattern of escalating aggression. "We need to be prepared for more trouble until Quentin returns." The day passed tensely, everyone on edge as they went about their duties. Tabitha kept the pistol with her, though she prayed she wouldn't need to use it. Night fell without incident, but no one relaxed their vigilance. It was just after midnight when the sound of approaching riders broke the silence. Miguel, who had been keeping watch from the porch, called out a challenge. The answer came in a familiar voice that sent relief flooding through Tabitha. "It's Quentin. Open up." She reached the door just as Miguel was opening it. Quentin strode in, trail worn and grim, followed by 4 strangers wearing badges. "Tabitha," he said, his eyes quickly scanning her for any sign of harm. "You're all right. We're all fine," she assured him. "The fires, I know. We saw the damage on the way in." He turned to include Miguel in the conversation. "This is Sheriff Taylor from Fort Davis and deputies from the Territorial Marshal's office. They've been tracking Blackstone's operation for months." Introductions were made, and as Rosa organized food and coffee for the new arrivals, plans were discussed. The lawman had been building a case against Blackstone, suspecting him of orchestrating rustling operations across 3 counties. The evidence from Circle might be the final piece they needed. "We'll ride for Blackstone's ranch at first light," the sheriff explained. "With luck, we'll find the stolen cattle there, along with evidence connecting him to the rustling." "I'm riding with you," Quentin stated, his tone brooking no argument. The sheriff nodded. "Figured as much. But let's be clear, this is a legal operation. We do this by the book." Tabitha pulled Quentin aside while the others continued planning. "Be careful," she said softly. "Blackstone sounds desperate, and desperate men are dangerous." He touched her cheek gently. "I will, but this has to end. I won't have you or anyone at Circle living in fear." They shared a brief, intense kiss before returning to the group. There would be no more sleep that night as preparations were made for the morning's confrontation. Dawn broke with the clarity that often follows storms, both literal and figurative. Tabitha stood on the porch, watching as Quentin and the lawmen prepared to depart. He approached for a final farewell, his expression a mix of determination and tenderness. "Stay close to the house today," he instructed. "Miguel's leaving 4 men behind for protection, just in case." She nodded, fighting the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "Come back to me," she said simply. "Count on it." He kissed her once more before mounting his horse and joining the waiting group. Tabitha watched until they disappeared from sight, then turned resolutely back to the house. There was work to be done, distractions to be found in routine tasks. The day stretched endlessly, each hour bringing increased anxiety. By late afternoon, with no word from the expedition, even Theodora's usually unflappable composure was showing signs of strain. It was dusk when they finally heard the sound of returning riders. Tabitha rushed to the porch, straining to see in the fading light. Relief flooded through her as she recognized Quentin's tall figure leading the procession. The news was good. They had found clear evidence of Blackstone's involvement in the rustling operations, including Circle cattle on his property and incriminating documents in his office. Blackstone himself and 3 of his men had been arrested and were being taken to Fort Davis to await trial. "It went smoothly then?" Tabitha asked later when she and Quentin had a moment alone. A shadow crossed his face. "Not entirely. There was resistance. Shots were fired." He rolled his shoulder, wincing slightly. Alarm shot through her. "You're hurt." "It's nothing, bullet just grazed me." The doctor in town already looked at it. She insisted on seeing for herself, and reluctantly he unbuttoned his shirt to reveal a bandaged wound along his upper arm. It was indeed minor, but the thought of how much worse it could have been shook her deeply. "Hey," he said softly, seeing her distress. "I'm fine. It's over now." She pressed her forehead against his good shoulder, allowing herself a moment of weakness. "When I think what could have happened, but it didn't." He tilted her chin up, meeting her eyes. "And now Circle is safe." "You're safe." There was something in his expression, an intensity that made her breath catch. "Quentin, I had a lot of time to think today," he said, his voice low and serious, "about what matters most to me, about the future." He took her hands in his. "I was going to wait, do this properly with a ring and all, but life's too uncertain for delays." Her heart raced as she realized what was coming. "Tabitha O'Malley," he continued, "I love you. I want to build a life with you here at Circle A. Will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." His smile was brilliant as he gathered her in his arms, mindful of his injury, and kissed her with a passion that left her breathless. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch, met with universal approval and celebration. Even Theodora, the most cautious of the 3 friends, gave her wholehearted blessing. "He's a good man," she told Tabitha that evening as they sat together on the porch. "And he loves you deeply. Anyone can see that." "I never expected to find this," Tabitha confessed. "When we stepped off that train, I was just hoping for work, for survival. And instead, you found a home, a future." Theodora's smile was tinged with something like wistfulness. "We all did," Tabitha reminded her. "You've built something wonderful with the school and Temperance." She glanced to where her friend was deep in conversation with Diego near the corral, their heads close together, oblivious to the world around them. Theodora followed her gaze and laughed softly. Indeed, I suspect we'll be planning another wedding before long. The summer passed in a golden haze of happiness as preparations were made for an autumn wedding. Quentin insisted on doing things properly, riding to Fort Davis to purchase a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that had belonged to his mother. Life at Circle settled back into its rhythms, though now with an undercurrent of joy and anticipation. The rustling incidents had ceased with Blackstone's arrest, and the ranch prospered under the combined care of Quentin and Tabitha, who increasingly functioned as partners rather than employer and employee. In late August, Temperance and Diego announced their own engagement, to no one's surprise. They planned a spring wedding, giving Tabitha and Quentin time to establish their married life first. As for Theodora, she had received an unexpected letter from the Territorial Education Office, offering her a position as supervisor for several small schools in the county. The role would allow her to continue teaching at Circle while also helping establish educational standards across the region. "It's a remarkable opportunity," she told Tabitha and Temperance as they sat together one evening, sharing tea and conversation. "But I'm not sure I should accept." "Why ever not?" Temperance asked. "It's perfect for you." Theodora hesitated. "I wouldn't want to leave you both." Tabitha reached over to squeeze her friend's hand. "You wouldn't be leaving us. Circle would still be your home base. And besides," she added with a smile, "we're hardly the stranded, desperate women we were when we arrived. Temperance will soon be married to Diego. I'll be Quentin's wife, and you deserve to pursue your passion." After further discussion, Theodora agreed to accept the position, which would begin after the new year. October arrived with cooler temperatures and preparations for the wedding, which would be held at Circle itself. Quentin's sister and her family would be traveling from California for the occasion, and invitations had gone out to neighbors and friends throughout the county. The night before the wedding, Tabitha sat at her dressing table, brushing her hair and reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From the desperation of that evening at the Fort Davis station to the joy of tomorrow's celebration, it seemed almost like a dream. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Opening it, she found Quentin standing there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding," he said, "but there's something I wanted to give you privately." Curious, she invited him in, leaving the door ajar for propriety's sake. He handed her a small, wrapped package. "What's this?" she asked, turning it in her hands. "Open it and see." Inside was a small leather-bound journal, its pages filled with his bold handwriting. She looked at him questioningly. "It's the story of Circle A," he explained. "Everything that happened here from the day I bought the land until—" He smiled. "Until the day 3 women huddled together at the station, and I said my ranch needed all of you." Tears pricked her eyes as she realized the significance of the gift. "You're giving me the past. And tomorrow we start writing the future, together." He kissed her softly. "Sleep well, my love. I'll see you at the altar." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself approved of the union. The ceremony was held in the afternoon on the broad lawn before the main house, which had been decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Quentin waited beneath an arch of twisted branches, looking both nervous and elated in his new suit. Tabitha walked toward him on Miguel's arm, wearing a gown of ivory silk that Temperance and Theodora had helped her select on a special trip to Fort Davis. Her friends preceded her down the makeshift aisle, each carrying a small bouquet of desert blooms. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, the couple exchanging vows they had written themselves before the circuit riding minister, who had traveled 2 days to perform the service. When Quentin kissed his bride to seal their union, the assembled guests erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night with food, music, dancing, and enough goodwill to warm even the coolest autumn evening. When the new Mr. and Mrs. Abernathy finally slipped away to begin their life together, it was with the blessings and good wishes of everyone at Circle A. The years that followed brought changes and challenges, joys and occasional sorrows, as all lives do. The Circle prospered under Quentin and Tabitha's joint stewardship, expanding its operations and reputation. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived a year after their wedding, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. Temperance and Diego established their own home on a corner of Circle A land that Quentin deeded to them as a wedding gift. Diego's skill with horses led to a successful breeding operation that complemented the main ranch's cattle business. Their family grew to include twin boys and a daughter, filling their home with laughter and energy. Theodora's educational work took her throughout the territory, but she always returned to Circle A, which remained her true home. Though she never married, she found fulfillment in her work and in her role as Aunt Theo to the growing brood of Circle A children. And as for the main house at Circle A, it was transformed by love and care from a bachelor's functional residence to a true home, warm, welcoming, and filled with life. The study where Tabitha had once organized chaotic accounts became a family room where children played and lessons were taught. The porch where Quentin had first confessed his feelings became a gathering place for friends and family, for storytelling and star-gazing. 10 years after their wedding, on a warm summer evening much like the one when they first met, Quentin and Tabitha sat together on that same porch, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "You ever think about that night at the station?" Tabitha asked, her head resting comfortably on her husband's shoulder. "How different our lives might have been if you hadn't stopped to help 3 stranded women." Quentin's arm tightened around her. "I try not to. The thought of never knowing you, never having all this." He gestured to encompass not just their children, but the entire ranch, the life they had built together. "It doesn't bear considering." She smiled, turning to look at the man who had transformed her life with a simple offer of work and shelter, an offer that had grown into love, partnership, and a shared future. "I'm glad you said your ranch needed all of us." "It did," he agreed, kissing her softly, "but I needed you most of all." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, content in each other's company. In the life they had created together, a life that had begun with 3 desperate women, a kind-hearted cowboy, and a journey that had led not just to shelter, but to home.